Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Brent Aiken, David Pruitt, and Russell Martin. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's your host for this week, David Pruitt.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time listening to us, we want to welcome you and invite you over to our website, www.studentministryconversations.org, where you can find all of our previous episodes, show notes, blog articles, and so much more. Our goal is that you are inspired, encouraged, and things that you hear on this podcast would equip you to be a better student pastor for the church that you are serving in. Let's get to it, guys. So today, we're trying something a little bit different. We are meeting in my buddy Josh's house. Hopefully you guys remember him from my very first podcast episode as a host. I've guested on it. Yeah, Josh and I spoke about the idea and topic of Better Together, which coincidentally was the topic and theme of our mission trip that we literally just finished. Like we're wearing the gear and everything. And we'll talk about that a little bit today. Yeah, I'm really excited to have both of you guys on. Usually we have one guest at a time, so it's nice to get more than one. And I'm also really, really excited, and I'm actually going to let Josh do the introducing. But I'm excited because not only are both of these guys pastors, they're brothers. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the family legacy and ministry. I know that there are so many people who maybe their dads or their grandparents or somebody in their family was in ministry, but when they feel that call, one of my big questions I want to hear from both of you guys is was it weird getting your call for the first time, like after knowing that your dad had been a pastor and different things like that? Like, was it one of those things where you're like, man, is this my calling or is it my dad's calling, and I'm just following in his footsteps, that kind of thing, and there's always those questions I think that a lot of us wonder that have been PKs in life. And so anyway, we're going to dive into all of those. But yeah, Josh, if you'll introduce your brother.
Yeah, man. First of all, thanks for having me back again. And as David said, we just finished up our mission trip, and our guest speaker for the week was my brother, TJ Lewis. TJ is my oldest brother, and he's been in ministry now for 24 years. Working on 24 years of youth ministry, and he's got some cool stories and everything to share. And hopefully we can answer your questions about what you said.
Yeah. So let's dive right in. TJ, if you'll tell us a little bit more about yourself, because Josh did.
Yeah, give us a little bit. Go watch my podcast. I mean, not my podcast, the one I was on.
Whoops. We're just going to go ahead and say right out of the gate, lower your expectations today.
We're exhausted.
We've got the sunburns to prove it. It's been a really, really good week for us, but I
got to see David in shorts.
That never happened.
Which never happened.
Ever. So you're also seeing me in a t-shirt, which also never
That's
happened.
That's true.
So,
man, two big moments.
I'm saying.
What does he normally wear?
Oh, jeans and a button-up.
Button-up.
Okay, we rocking shirtless on the road.
Right.
What kind of
not that kind of podcast.
Typically flannel, the lumberjack.
Okay.
With the beard.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, my name is TJ. I'm rolling into year 24 of student ministry. I'm currently serving at Lake Church in Arlington, Texas, which is weird because Josh will tell you, he and I grew up in little bitty, teeny tiny, small towns and little bitty, teeny tiny churches. The first student ministry I ever had was the one that I got put in charge of when I was 17 years old. We didn't have a youth group growing up except for me and Tim and Josh. Tim is our other brother. We have a younger sister too, but she was still just a little bitty when we were all teenaged. But anyway, yeah, started when I was 17, just turned 40. I want to die a youth pastor, and I jokingly say all the time that youth ministry is going to be what kills me. But outside of my wife and my kids and the state of Texas, youth ministry is my favorite thing. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm also glad to know I'm to die in youth ministry.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, like we talked about just a little bit ago, I'm very interested to hear a little bit more of your story, and you kind of went into it as well. But talk about what it was like, I guess, number one, both of you guys being pastors' kids.
You can go first.
Well, I guess I should say I don't know any different, right? Like dad. So I was born. I'm as the oldest.
Is that how that happened?
Mom and dad still lived in the dorm. Like there was a married couple dorm at the Christian college where they met and got married, which coincidentally 20 years, golly, almost to the day after they met and got married was when I met my wife at the same college and met and got married to her. And she's the daughter of a couple that they double dated with. So interesting enough, not only
Talk about legacy.
Yeah.
My goodness.
And I
only-
met my wife at the same Christian
Yes.
college, and we got married. And so I went to
There's a
college.
pattern here.
Yeah, I went to college. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I was looking for a wife.
I was
So-
not. But
I was like, apparently this is where we get our wives. So
I did not even kind of want to be at that college. But my mother is a prophet. And she told me since I was a little bitty, listen, you're going to go to this college, you're going to find a wife, and it's going to be awesome. But there's not a chance, Mom. And man, the first day I was on campus, met my wife, and 3 months later we were engaged.
On
So,
the first day.
yeah, and she's the daughter of a couple that my parents double dated with.
Wow.
My wife's father is also a pastor. Every male that my children is related to is a pastor, with the exception of one.
Wow.
I mean, it's remarkable. So all that said, what was it like growing up as a preacher's kid? I don't know any different. Dad, when we were little, Dad was the youth ministry, music ministry combo. I don't remember those years. I remember Dad. I take that back. I got saved when I was 5, and Dad was the youth pastor of music ministry combo. So it was our senior pastor at the time that actually led me to the Lord. But then from then on, Dad was the senior pastor. And most of those are our memories. Some of them are really sweet. Some of them are not so sweet. In fact, sadly, some of those not so sweets are the memories that are locked in, inside out, right? The core memories,
Yeah.
kind of a deal. So growing up, I tell people all the time, man, God started comedy ministry when I was 15. I didn't understand it because I didn't feel like that was even a possibility. It wasn't until I was 17 when I was really ready to say, okay, Lord, yeah, you got me. But people would say to me, oh, you're going to be pastor just like your daddy, just like your grandpa too. Man, there's not a chance. And it wasn't because I was mad at the church. It wasn't because I didn't love Jesus. Both of those things were true. I love Jesus and love the church. I just thought, like, why would I sign up for this? Like, this is not, like, nothing about this looks like fun. My goal was to be a baseball player. I was really good at baseball. Wasn't terribly good at much else, and thought, okay, I'm going to be a baseball player. And then I got pretty good at the FFA stuff. But okay, well, when I'm done playing baseball, I'll be an ag teacher. But what are different plans? But yeah, we lived in parsonages. We got the occasional unannounced visit from a deacon. Got chewed out by any number of deacons over the years. And
we weren't allowed to have pets unless the church voted at business meeting that it was okay.
Yeah, like your
That
lives.
was-
The type of churches we grew up in, there were any number of decisions that involved our family that had to be approved by the church.
Yeah.
Which where we're at, like where I'm at now, praise God, that's not even a thing. Like it feels crazy to me, but again, I didn't know any different. So we just that's just how we roll.
Yeah.
And don't like I'm bitter about that. Learned a lot. Polity matters, and not all of it was bad, but in a nutshell. Am I thoroughly marked in how I pastor from what I saw my daddy did? Absolutely. Dad's crazy hard worker. Frequently, Dad was bivocational. And so we saw that, like, Dad was a man, he provided for his family and did whatever it took. And I praise God for that. We still faithfully pastoring a church of, I don't know, what, 20, 25 people?
I don't even think it's that.
It's a little bitty
It's
church,
little
but
bitty.
he's
He's there.
close to a decade now. He's preaching every Sunday. It's very cool.
He plays piano sometimes and leads the singing, and then
Yeah.
he gets up and he does the preaching.
Yeah.
And he visits those people in their homes and hospitals.
Yeah.
He is very faithful. He is a good shepherd.
Yeah.
He's a good evangelist too, but he's always had a shepherd heart mentality.
Yeah.
I was gonna say one of the things, we weren't poor, but we definitely weren't rich.
No.
And so I can remember there was many times that I didn't want to go into ministry because I thought, if this is it, like, you got new shoes for back to school, and then you had to make them last until Christmas.
Yeah.
Or like, I remember one time I went out for the basketball team just so I could get another pair of shoes. Like, I was like, Mom, they will not let me wear my street shoes on the court. And so she'd be like, okay, JCPenney's got these Under Armour, no, not Under Armour. That would have been too much money at the time. And One, that's what it was. These And One shoes on sale. And you did it. You went with it. They always provided. And one of the things we didn't know until we were much older, and I say you might have been more clued in than I was. Mom's health wasn't as great as we had been told, and there was some medical debt that they were carrying, but they never burdened us with that. So yeah, that might have been more than what you wanted to hear. I did want to say this. TJ kind of lightly touched on it, but yeah, our grandfather's pastor or was a pastor as well. And so we have been raised around church our entire lives. When we would go on vacation, and by vacation, I mean go to see other family, it would be to go visit their churches. And so that was a big deal. Like, I remember the first time I didn't go to church on a Sunday, I thought I was going to go to heaven. Like, I was like, what are you doing? Like, at first I was kind of like, this is cool, I'm sleeping in. And then I was like, but if Jesus comes back and I'm not at church, I'm going to get left behind. You know, like, it just,
And Mom's gonna be yelling at us.
that's right.
Oh man. You touched on something that I think is kind of an interesting thing that I don't know if it translates totally to ministry, but like, you think about in a standard family, there's the family business. Like, say you own like a little convenience store or something, and the rest of the family is basically expected. All kids are expected to work through it, and then at some point, one of you was going to take over the family business when Mom and Dad are ready to retire.
Right.
Was there ever again, I know it's different because we are talking about calling, so it's obviously not the same, but was there kind of a level of, as you began to receive that calling and understand that calling, was there ever a point where you kind of, this is kind of a two-part question, was there a part where you kind of like doubted that it really was that, or if it was like, well, Grandpa was and Dad was, and when you think about the ties like with your wives and different things like that, like how deep that runs, but was there ever also kind of a point where it was like, okay, great, like, well, of course you're called. This is what we do. This is the Lewis family tradition in a sense,
It almost feels like that now. I don't know if we said about Tim, our middle brother, is a children's pastor
At a church.
It's like, you're reading the scriptures about the families of prophets, and I've had people go, and you're like, that's totally your family. And it sort of is. That's not at all what we set out to do, obviously.
Right.
I can tell you,
But it's what our grandmothers prayed for.
oh, no doubt. No doubt. Yeah, great. Yeah, if Grandma Collins was still alive, she would go, of course, this is all I've ever asked Jesus for.
Right.
And she was sincere about that. Grandma Lewis, I have no doubt she's still alive. She probably prayed that many times too. Kind of fun. Grandpa Lewis was a plumber, but was also a Gideon that was frequently preaching in churches.
Prisons too.
And Grandma and Grandpa going to our little bitty grandma, man, get in the face of these prisoners and tell them about Jesus. So cool. I've also watched Grandma hold up the line in grocery stores, giving them a Gideon Bible and sharing the gospel. We have an amazing family. It's certainly in the Lewis side. The Cullen side was all sorts of awesome too, but I'm very proud to be Lewis. Back to your original question. When I was 15, and it's easy to look back now, that's totally God was pulling on my heart. Like, I was feeling all this stuff, but I just didn't know what to do. It never occurred to me, ministry, because that just like, there's no way. No, that's not going to happen. When I was 17, when God affirmed that calling, Like, it wasn't even an argument. I was like, okay, well, this makes sense. Yes, Lord, I'll do it. I was on a mission trip in Galveston, and it's funny. I was the group that I was with, which was the first youth ministry I ended up taking over. It was another church in town that would let me go on mission trip. Again, we didn't have a youth group, but the sister church, First Baptist, said, hey, why don't you come on this trip with us? So I'm standing up front beside the youth pastor because there was so many kids moving. He's, hey, come up here during invitation time. Come up and pray with kids. So I'm doing it, pastoring and not really thinking about the fact that I'm pastoring, right? Mm-hmm. And the speaker, the evangelist said, man, I really feel like some of y'all, God's called in ministry. And dude, God grabbed my heart. And okay, yeah, God, great. So I call home for mom and dad that night and tell my mom and dad. And dad was thrilled. And my mom cried. And because she was happy, but she said, it feels like you're joining the military. Like, this is a good thing. This is an honorable thing. But I'm also terrified for you, of course, because she lived it, right? She saw the good and the bad and the ugly and the whole thing. She said, nothing makes me happier that you're serving Jesus. And I'm scared to death for you. But it's right, that's good, right? But it's because she knows the quote unquote family business. And so I, took encouragement, solace in that. And yeah, lots of people over there say, oh, I'm not at all surprised. Your daddy did this, you're doing it too. Makes total sense. I don't know what your experience has been like over the years.
So when I was younger, I was very outgoing. I know you find that hard to believe, David. And I would actually stand on stage after church and like regurgitate and re-preach Dad's messages. Like, I was preaching at 5 years old, and I remember like vividly in first grade, I preached one of the first messages I ever preached to my classmates was, God is everywhere. He's even standing on my big toe. And like the kids laughed. They thought that was so funny. But here I was declaring the gospel. All that to say, about my junior high year, we ended up moving. Unfortunately, this was a church hurt that took place. Dad was forced out of the church. We didn't know why, we didn't know what, but we were just told, hey, you got 30 days and you got to be out of the parsonage.
This was a month after I swung the ministry and preached my first sermon, by the way.
Yeah.
Wow.
So basically, right out the gate, there's that punch that
Door
mom
closed.
was terrified of. I'm experiencing that firsthand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were forced to leave, which TJ ended up staying because it was the senior year, and it really shifted our family dynamic. That's another story for another time. But all that to say, when I got to Arkansas, I was hurt and I was forced out, and all of a sudden I stopped. I loved the Lord, but I stopped loving the church, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
And I began to have my prodigal son moments. And so from 7th grade to 10th grade, I ran from the calling. I had Jonah mindset. Like, I'll do anything but. I'll go anywhere but. And finally, I had a major incident take place in my life where I embarrassed myself, and I embarrassed our church, and I embarrassed our family. And I was lucky that the incident wasn't worse than it was. And God broke me and said, you're either going to live for me or you're going to go down the wrong path, and it's not going to go good. And so first thing I had to do was, as David says, restore unto me the joy of my salvation. I had to get that rededication back in place. And it was a bit of a struggle, because it's always this. I mean, we struggle with our flesh daily. And little by little, I felt the calling coming back into my life. And I remember just before my senior year, I went with you guys and we went to Floydada, Texas. TJ was a youth pastor at this point in Arkansas because he had just married his wife that he met at Conway. And they were working, or he was working as a youth pastor. That was your first church, right? I mean,
First church that
paid you?
Well, no, I was at the church that paid me. First
Okay.
church that Beck and I got to do together.
There you go.
That was the kind of the big element.
So I went with him,
Yeah.
and we're on this trip, and a good friend of his, Travis Plumley, was preaching at Floydada, Texas. And he goes, hey man, we're gonna swing up here and we're gonna go listen to Travis. And that night, Travis was talking about surrendering to the ministry. And it's the same thing. I just knew. And I just threw myself out of that chair and I was praying. My brother came over there. He's like, what's going on? And so I told him, I said, God's calling me to be a pastor. And I'll never forget it. He goes, well, it's about stinking time you realize that, And So from that moment, my going into my senior year, my trajectory was set. And I began planning, okay, I'm going to go to Central Baptist College because that's where our family goes. And hopefully I'll find a wife. And it just kind of flowed that way. But yeah, all that to say, when I was younger, yes. And so I see that in my son now. I see him preach these messages and stuff. And so I pray, especially as my daughter is now becoming a teenager soon, and my son one day will, I pray they don't have those Jonah moments and they don't have those church hurts. I tell my kids all the time, church isn't something we do, it's something we get to do, and help them understand. Just like I was telling you last week, I'm sorry, we're tired again, but I was telling you how we did church underground here, and I got fake arrested in front of the students, which was a trip in of itself. But the whole point was to iterate to them that, like, this is the reality for so many people around the world.
Right.
And so go to church, because you might not always have that freedom.
Right. So, well, that's such an important thing to remember, because I mean, you know, whether you're listening to this podcast in a ministry legacy like what these guys have, or you're just kind of listening because you're awesome and listen to all of our podcasts, which, you know, kudos to you. Shout out to you, because we don't shout that out enough. But I also think that there's a beauty in reminding ourselves how blessed we really are to be in churches, because you guys are absolutely right. There's a lot of church hurt. I've experienced quite a bit, and even in my current church and over the years, and it's such an important reminder. I was at high school camp last week, and one of the breakout talks that we had was specifically geared towards PKs, pastor kids. And, you know, and the cool thing about it was, like, so I go in and it's a whole room full of pastors' kids. And my buddy Karis, who was a youth pastor in Happy, Texas, and now she's kind of transitioned into a bit of like a missions and family. But one of the really cool things about it is that we're in this whole room full of it, and everyone's like, "Oh, so you're a PK?" And I'm like, "I'm the P in the PK." No, I have zero legacy in ministry. Well, I say that. I think there is a pastor on my mom's side that I've never met. But I've never met him, so I really don't know. But I mean, yeah, so it's definitely one of those situations. But for me, it was like the first time they ever offered that was last year as a breakout. And I remember thinking, man, that sounds so good. Like, I would love to attend that as a parent perspective, to hear how hard it must be to be a PK, and like, how can my wife and I do better, you know, and ministering to our son, because there are days where I'm just completely, I'm tired and I'm exhausted, and I've heard, you know, the same complaint for the 40th time that week, and, you know, and then you take all that home, and my son's only 6 years old, and you know, he's internalizing some of these things. There's gonna be a moment where he's gonna be like, you know what, if this is what church is about, because he hears the ugly, then I don't want anything to do with it. And then on the flip side, if we shield him too much from hearing some of those things, it'll be like a deer in headlight if God gets the opportunity to call him, you know, and or if that's what God's calling for him is, you know. And so definitely something that I was really thinking a lot about, and the perspectives were so cool and so interesting, and also heartbreaking, you know, for so many that have felt a lot of that church and watching dad struggle through that, or for some of the moms struggle with some of those things, and not really understanding all the nuances, because many pastors try to shield their kids. And I think a lot of parents do that in general, but especially in a situation like that. So I guess I'm interested to hear a little bit more from you guys. You both kind of touched on it a little bit, but the kind of the ministry hurts, as well as, you know, some of the good things, because you guys are right. I mean, it's going to be very difficult.
Well, when we get together, there's no awkward moment of who's going to pray over a meal. It's like, I got, you know, it's just the way it is.
That's fun. The best one was when our little sister got married.
Yeah.
And we in the service are arguing over who gets to do the wedding.
She asked me, by the way.
We had so much fun, Jackie, with her on that. That was good. No doubt.
So you got to do the wedding.
I did her wedding.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's really cool. It was awesome.
Okay.
I didn't do the premarital counseling though. I was like, listen, you
Yeah,
gotta go do
like-
that with someone else.
Like, bro, no, we're not talking about this.
Okay, flip side there, I did my premarital counseling with my father-in-law as a pastor, including the sex session.
Oh, man.
We talk about awkward. It's still 20 years later, it's still awkward, but
Yeah.
not awkward to him at all.
Yeah.
He's just, he can flip the pastoral switch in his head. He's no longer talking about his daughter. He's talking about his congregant. I don't have that switch.
I don't think I could.
I did want to say this. I was sitting here and I was thinking, and me and Rachel, we talked about this one day, which by the way, one of her uncles is also a pastor.
You guys are awesome.
We were talking about how I'm pretty sure there is only one divorce on either side of our families. And that is,
Wow.
you know, just a powerful thing in of itself. And I understand divorce happens. Please understand, I'm not talking bad about it. There are reasons and whatnot. But unfortunately, divorce hurts and it causes family divisions and all this stuff. And we are so blessed to have strong marriages to look at. And when we struggle, go and talk to. And in fact, her parents and my parents' anniversary is the same day. And it's the difference of 1 year between them. So mom and dad just celebrated what? How many years? 30?
I'm
31?
41, 42. Because I just turned 40.
So they celebrate, that's right, 40 something years. Yeah, that's right. Because Walt and Jan just celebrated 39, it's 40, 41. Yeah. Crazy when you look at just these little things of God going like, hey, check this out. So,
I think your original question was what kind of hurt we
yeah,
experienced.
sorry.
I remember distinctly specific. So my hometown is Anson, Texas, and when Dad was dismissed, he wasn't fired, but he was given the ultimatum, right?
It was a vote of confidence.
Yeah.
After a message he had just preached.
It was the former pastor that didn't want to. He was unretiring, and there was a group of people that wanted to bring the former pastor. We'd been there for 7 years. Like it wasn't like we'd been there a few weeks. 7 years, and a group of people were like, no, we'd like the old guy back. So after that went down, Dad, instead of them doing the vote, Dad stepped aside. Again, when you give somebody that ultimatum, you're firing them, right?
Yeah.
So Dad resigns, and I'll never forget, we're standing out in the hallway and people are walking out shaking hands, and some folks are genuinely tore up. I'm just ticked, genuinely ticked. One of the deacons had the nerve to walk out, and I didn't hear the whole conversation, but I remember distinctly him looking at my mom and saying to my mom, you need to be a better wife. This is a 70-something-year-old, but I was ready to hit him. What are you talking about? You need to be a better wife. You need to be a better deacon, dude. What are we?
And again, we didn't know about mom's health issues.
Yeah.
We didn't know this stuff, so because mom's never really been a cook, and I know she's probably watching this. We love you, mama. We may get, Hamburger Helper got us there. I'm so thankful for
God
that.
for Hamburger Helper.
But she's never, a lot of people view the pastor's wife as an extension of the pastor.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, the pastor's wife will make this for the potluck, or the pastor's wife will go visit, and pastor's wife. Our mom didn't do a whole lot of that. That just, God didn't give her those gifts, I guess would be the way to say. But there was things going on behind the scenes that we didn't know about until years later. Our mom had some, it's called a Chiari malfunction, some brain issues and stuff going on, and it had immobilized her in a lot of ways. And, she was suffering quietly, and not everybody got that. Yeah.
I remember one time we had our driveway in Anson. It was pretty neat. It was a corner lot, and it was a pretty good sized driveway. So the church let us put a basketball hoop in.
Yes.
Right. And so one day, and this is on me, but one day I came home, I don't know where I got the spray paint, came home spray paint, and I spray painted a 3-point line, which wasn't official, by the way.
It was like,
Yeah, best I could, and I don't
it
know.
was
I
weird.
would've
It was
been-
closer where he would shoot from for some reason.
Sure. It was, I don't know, I was a 7th or 8th grader. I know I wasn't measuring, so but I put the 3-point line in, put a free throw line in, and then in the free throw line, in the lane, you see colleges, whatever, they write some word, and so I put the phrase "my house." Because I was a cocky little jerk, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
not my house.
And so that was kind of what I was thinking, right? So spray paint that in, and I remember Dad come home, and Dad got on me. And it wasn't because Dad didn't think it was cool, and it wasn't Dad didn't appreciate it. It was the fact that son, this isn't our house. The church owns this house, and I'm going to have to answer for that. And sure enough, he did, because it wasn't our house. It's not our driveway. And I didn't hear the follow-up conversation. I just remember I got in a lot of trouble, and I probably should have. I needed permission. There's a lot of things that there's the balance there, but having to constantly think through this isn't our house. Like I can't just do whatever I want. That's a little bit of like several times I broke many windows, either throwing baseballs, whatever, just broke window. And that's, it's not just man, we have to go fix a window. Man, we have to go to the church. And it's just that stuff wears on,
Well, yeah, it's like it's such a unique thing to think about. Like, we all do something dumb and break a neighbor's window, or we break our own window or whatever. And we answer to our parents, we answer to our neighbor, we apologize, we work a bunch of jobs to fix it, and then it's over. But you don't typically think about having to go before your own church,
And they hold on to it.
Yeah, they do.
They begin to tally a record of wrongs, which is weird, right? Because the church should exist on grace. Like that's kind of the central theme of our message. But I can tell you there was times that I did dumb things, whether it was breaking stuff at the house or just doing something dumb in church. And you're always under a microscope. This is probably what bothers me the most about PKs. And again, my daughter is fixing to be in youth group. And I've gone to my youth leaders, and I'm going to go to them again as she starts this fall. And I'm going to say, listen, my kid's not perfect. My kid needs grace just as much as these other kids.
Yeah.
And if you think my kid's going to be the example and they're always going to know the answers and all these things, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Because my kid is just like these other students. Because there's such an expectation that we put on PKs. And that is what drives them away from the church.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
that's actually where I was planning on going next is, did you guys feel that pressure, those PKs? I mean, obviously y'all kind of talked about that, but I mean.
I remember, where was it? I was somewhere, and I remember telling them, you can trust me, I'm a pastor's kid. And the person laughed at me. And I was like, no, seriously, you can trust me. Because by all accounts, I was a genuinely good kid by all markers. And everybody in Anson, Texas, tell you so, save maybe 1 or 2 people, right? But so I told you, yeah, you can trust me, I'm a preacher's kid. I just laughed. Well, then I started meeting other preacher's kids.
Yeah.
Oh, now I get it. Okay. But why kids go that route? And there's any number of factors. Some of it could be church hurt, and other of it could be just, we all know really well, teenagers do stupid things, regardless of who their daddy is.
Yeah.
Sometimes because of who their daddy is.
Right.
And so, we felt that pressure. Certainly more so at church than maybe in the community, although there would be people, certainly in our small towns, that would say, do I need to call your daddy? Your daddy's a pastor. You should know better than that. And that rarely happened to me because I was a good kid. But even walking the hallways of school, sometimes that would just sort of sit in your head. Hey, I've got to be good because I'm a PK, and that's hard.
Well, I think part of it too, you were the oldest.
Yeah.
So you set the bars and stuff.
Yeah.
Tim was the great child. Tim never got in trouble ever.
Still hasn't.
In fact, Tim would be Jacob, and TJ would be a little more Esau. Tim was mom's favorite, she loved, and all this quiet. And then I was just flat out ornery, and people would say that all the time. And I can remember vividly moments of people saying, well, preachers' kids are the worst. And I heard it so much so that I began to believe it. And that was when my moment of real rebellion started to take place, because I said, if I've got no chance, if you've already prejudged me and you see me as the worst,
Game on.
then you're going to get it.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah. And so this is one of the things I tell people all the time. Be careful what you speak over other people. This is what I experienced in my junior high years. Now, some people say, yeah, but your actions, you're responsible for it. You're right, but there are outside voices that can lead us down these paths.
Which is why we do youth ministry. Because outside voices influence teenagers' paths.
Yes. Put that on a shirt.
Praise God. Like that's the way it's supposed to work. So let's point them in the right direction, not away.
That's right.
It's amazing how I've even heard people say, Noah's just now starting to understand some of that pressure. There's been times where
You named your kid Noah. He's gonna have you pressure, buddy.
Which is really funny because it had nothing to do with the Bible whatsoever. I thought,
awesome.
and people are like, "Oh, it's got to be." And I was like, "Actually, I just thought the name sounded cool." Legitimately, if I'm being 100% honest, Noah Gray Pruitt. I thought if he drops the Pruitt side and just goes Noah Gray, sounds like a really good worship pastor, artist. Okay, there was a level of he would make such a cool worship pastor one day.
Yeah.
And he may or may not play drums already, but it's like one of those things. It's like, don't push, Dave. Don't push. It's not your calling. It's God's. But at the same time, I'm already starting to notice some of the pressure that's being put on him, because it's just like, oh, I've noticed that your son is really well behaved. Like, and what's funny is I've also even heard some of it like, well, he's really well behaved even when all the other children in the church are just running all over the place and going crazy and stuff like that. And they're like, well, how come yours is so well behaved so that we can make the other kids do it? And I've even heard someone's like, well, Noah's not doing it, so you better not do it. And Noah's just kind of like, like trying to exit the situation, and so it's just one of those situations where it's like, man, don't add those. I don't know. It scared me. I remember thinking even before we got, my wife was pregnant with him. I remember thinking, man, our kid is in so much trouble, automatically. And it was a legitimate fear and conversations we had together about how do we deal with that? What if our kid doesn't want to be in youth ministry with dad? Is that okay? Would my pastor be okay with it? Would my church be okay with that? Because shouldn't our kids have the same opportunity to choose their church? I mean, I realize that that's not always true for every church, but I think about most of our youth ministries, we have students whose parents go somewhere else on Sunday morning, and so they go with their families on Sunday morning and then come on Wednesday night with us. Or maybe we've got a few kids that their church on Sunday morning don't have a youth ministry on Wednesday night that leads, and so they come hang out with us on Wednesday nights, and they would never come on Sunday because that's where their family is. And so all of those different dynamics, and so it's like,
except for VBS. During VBS, our parents let us
Oh,
go to
man.
any church in town.
Praise the
And
Lord.
we loved it.
Yeah, cookies every day.
Yeah. We're like, what's going on? It's like, no, you can go to that church. It's VBS.
Bigger churches have better cookies.
Yeah.
true.
So
And more kids.
Right. Well, we were talking about that on the drive over. We're having VBS this week at our church, and Josh is having VBS next week, and so we're like, because he's like, what? You've been gone a lot. Yeah, I've had no alone time. So she was like, I'm going to have Noah go to First Baptist VBS so that I can get a break. And she was like, oh my gosh, I'm that parent. And then she was like, do you think that people would be okay with that? I was like, Josh brought his kids to ours. So, I mean, if anything, we're just going to say, hey, we're just, spreading the love just like Josh did.
Better together.
Better together. Always better together. If you didn't check out that podcast, check out our first one. It's like episode 90 something.
Mm.
But yeah, better together. It's a very good thing.
I will say, we were kids that, because we were in VBS everybody had the same theme then.
Mhm.
So we crushed it.
We did.
Bible trivia.
We have prizes.
Me and Tim got banned from being part of the Bible trivia at camp every year because we would just obliterate all the other. Again, Dad was very faithful. I know the Bible really, really well because Daddy brought the noise every
Yeah.
week. And when I was actually listening, we learned a lot of good stuff. So we were also those preachers' kids that like Bible nerds and, we're going to take you down. That was kind of fun. But the whole VBS thing played into that. We just heard the same story week after week after week. That's how you learn. So it's not the worst thing.
Not at all.
Good can come of that.
And definitely.
And the cookies.
If you hear nothing else today, hear this. You can receive good cookies.
Then you should serve good cookies.
That's what I was gonna say is if you hear nothing else, you better check and make sure your church is serving the right cookies.
Because
it can
there is a
influence the
measure.
direction in the path of the other kids' lives. So make sure you got the Oreos and not the twists and shouts. You know what I'm saying? Spend the extra $2. No,
Same thing.
there are some things that are not. But,
Oh man. So I always try to end these things with a bit of a challenge, which and I realize again, this is very much an open conversation. This was the original vision that Brent Russell had was, to just sit at a table and have a conversation about ministry. It doesn't always have to be something like specifically like, okay, this is an area where you may be struggling. Let's talk about that, And we certainly have those episodes, but I think it's nice to be able to also sit here and just have an open conversation about that, because maybe where you are, you may have maybe your kid is the PK, or you have another PK. Like there's another interesting concept that we can probably talk about all day. Having your boss's kids in your youth ministry, that's a hard challenge.
yeah.
I have my senior pastor's daughter right now, and I have my former senior pastor's 2 grandkids in my youth group right now.
So what's the dynamic there? Let's talk about that.
Terrifying.
Oh, I bet.
But also awesome because they're both men. So at my current church, where I was at previously, was 30 minutes down the road. Well, I was serving under the church in Burleson under this man who's just turned 60. I was there when his grandkids were born. He was just telling me all about Amelia and Philip, and I'm so proud of my grandkids. Well, now they're in my youth group because they live in the town where I live. Their parents were part of the reason why I got hired at this church.
Wow.
So I've got them, and then again, my senior pastor's daughter, and they're all good friends. I distinctly remember, probably more so than when my kids joined the youth group. I've never had the pastor's kids. Certainly never had my former pastor will tell you he loves his grandchildren more than he loves his children, right? Like straight up every day of the week. My parents love my grandchildren more than they love me. So like this is heavy. But it ends up they're awesome kids, and it really is a joy. And I frequently, that's a lie. From time to time, I'll pull this up and listen, look, I will never treat you differently, but I will always protect you. And I will let you know, just like I get the PK thing, or the grand PK thing, like, and so just it's okay to come in my office and vent if you ever had that. And I'm so grateful. Like we have an amazing church that really they don't treat my kids or any other pastoral kid staff any different. If anything, they're probably a little too gracious with my kids. But that's another story for another day. That all being said, like that's a real thing when your pastor's kids are in the group. That's praise God, I haven't had to have any meetings where I screwed up and
Right.
But that sort of hangs over your head too. Okay, I gotta be really careful here.
You get done speaking, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Did I just say? Yep, that's gonna be a meeting tomorrow.
Or even when you
when they mistranslate it.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, they said you said no, I did not. Did I? No.
Well, maybe. Well, the spirit took over. I don't know what you said. But yeah, I mean, and I know Josh had that dynamic not too long ago. She graduated, and I have our pastor's 2 oldest, and his 2 youngest are in children's ministry. And so It's been interesting. One of my favorite conversations was early on when they got here 3 years ago. Their oldest daughter had so many questions about Jesus, and very similar to you guys' story. Mom and dad are everything. Mom is the children's pastor and the co-worship leader with dad, who's also the youth pastor and the music minister and the pastor and probably the secretary at times. And they always had a secretary, but you know how that can be too. And so they did everything. And so when we had those first few conversations and just trying to get to know her and what, how her heart beat and how she ticked and just different things like that, it was very interesting because one of the first questions she asked me was, okay, what's actually real? And I was like, what do you mean? She was just like, oh yeah, I've heard about this Jesus. My dad talks about him all the time, and he regurgitates some of the same old stories and stuff like that. As a kid, you're just like, yeah, but your mom and dad, or watching mom and dad do everything, and children's ministry all the way through. It's like they never felt like they could ask the tough questions or even push back because mom and dad are like, seriously, guys, y'all chill. I'm trying to help these other kids, and not that they felt that, but you see the dynamic, and I'm sure you guys have felt it at times, and it's almost like mom and dad are a little bit harder because they have that expectation, because they do have that. I mean, let's be honest, we have that worry with our kids, like, dude, if you mess up, like, I'm the one who gets in trouble. I have to answer for that. And one thing I love about my senior pastor is he's done a really good job of letting him know, hey, you cannot and should not ever worry about your decisions affecting my job, because 100%, if I am in a church that would fire me over my kid being a kid, then I don't need to be there. Yeah. And just the protection there, like just completely releasing from the pressure of that. But the cool thing about the conversation was that in doing so, it was like, what about this? What about this? And she had certain doubts, and it was like within about a good couple of weeks of conversations, she looked at me and she just said, okay, I think you've answered all my doubts. Let's pray. And it was just, it's like she was just waiting. She just needed somebody other than dad and other than mom to say, this really is real. This isn't just the family business. This is, this God that we serve is so much more than what we're just telling you. We need you to believe this, not because we're mom and dad, but because we are also believers, and it's important for you to know this Jesus that we serve and why we serve and all of this, and why we have a parsonage that you have to be extra careful with, all of those things, and so for her, just being able to answer some of those questions, she goes, okay, mom and dad weren't crazy, let's pray. And almost immediately it was like, okay, I want to serve here and here and here, and where, and she sings for us, and she plays keyboard, and her sister plays drums. Like, I was able to teach both of them, and they're both on our worship team. Fun thing, I took Katie to high school camp with us last week, and she drummed as an 8th grader, or going into 8th grade. She drummed for the entire high school camp, and it was like, that's how talented she is. And it's just like, blows my mind. But it's been really cool to see them be able to step into that. And I know specifically they both have felt a call to ministry, and they're discerning where that is. And it's scary, of course, but it's been really cool to hear all that. Anyway, all that to say, what would be some advice for you guys as both understanding the uniqueness of being the PK, the GPK, I think is what we finally heard. GPK. I
was trying to remember, was granddad's parents a pastor?
Does it go that deep?
I think
Grandpa Cullens was a farmer. Grandma Cullens was the daughter pastor.
That's it.
Yeah. Wow. So we're talking, what's that? It's the blessings, generational. Yeah, very much generational. Maybe we change the name of this. It's just generational. But you guys, you have that very unique perspective of, we've been the pastor, we've been the pastor's kid. What's your advice for youth pastors who maybe are struggling with being a youth pastor to their pastor's kid, and especially if the relationship there isn't good?
I loved your story because your story really does set up and describe perfectly what youth ministry is supposed to be. Our number one role is not to be the chief discipler of any teenagers' lives. Our number one role is to be the reinforcer of what mom and dad are teaching at home. Now, ideally, our students are coming to us from Christian families.
Right.
So if it's your pastor's son or daughter, they're coming from a Christian family. Now, we all know pastors are not perfect. Even the great pastors are not perfect, which means kids are coming to us from imperfect homes, but nonetheless, they are being taught by their parents, this is who Jesus is, this is how we follow him. And so these kids are coming to us, and yeah, they've got questions, whether they're pastors' kids or not, because they're still teenagers. And so our job is to reinforce with the scripture and with the scriptures alone, truth of the Bible, and hopefully, prayerfully, as kids are hearing what mom and dad are teaching, and then now they're hearing from another pastor, and even more ideally, hopefully you've got some great volunteers who are also vocalizing the exact same things, and kids are going, okay, here's all these voices in life, and they're all telling me essentially the same thing: Jesus is Lord. I want to follow Jesus. So that would be my encouragement, regardless of, man, even if you've got a lousy relationship with pastor, number one, if that's true, I'm sorry, but number two, that's still your role. Continue to reinforce the truth of the gospel to that kid. And if you've got a bad relationship with pastor, it's entirely possible that kid you're pastoring doesn't have necessarily a great relationship with pastor. Do not try to rescue that kid or try to subvert
turn them against
that child's relationship with their parent. Man, God will never honor that.
That's right.
Yeah.
But you can absolutely minister to and encourage that kid, and also model for that kid, hey, you know what? Even though things are not great at home, and you got to be careful what you share here, right? I'm modeling how to deal with a parent/pastor, and maybe not that's so great, but I'm still submitting to authority because that's what King Jesus would have me do.
Yeah. So
Good.
good.
Yeah, so he answered it. I mean, in simplest terms, it's preach the gospel.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying is preach the gospel. Continue to reinforce the truth that is found in Scripture to those kids and answer those questions when they come up. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make a lot of times is we just say, well, you got to believe. Well, show me, help me, get me there. As a student, I tell this to parents all the time. There's a moment in a child's life, and you're probably experiencing this now with Noah at about 6, and they say why, and it isn't back talk. It's help me understand why. I cannot learn and I cannot process this, so I'm saying why so that I get there. And the easy thing to do is say, well, because I told you. And a lot of times, this is what happens within these homes, is these parents have given them these short answers. It's my way or the highway. It's because I told you, when they're still searching for that why. And so this is what I just always try to reinforce with the kids is we'll let you ask questions, and I say, and we'll even answer them. And then I say, and if I don't know the answer to your question, I'll go ask Pastor Ben. And if Pastor Ben doesn't know the answer to your question, you're just asking the wrong questions. That's what I like to joke with them. But in all seriousness, it's our job to navigate through the scriptures and helping them have a better understanding. Now, ultimately, they have to make that decision, right? When it comes to faith, my faith can't be their faith. Their parents' faith can't be their faith. They have to get there. I did want to say this, though, and I just want to say, talking about a legacy. Your legacy right now, youth pastor, as you're watching this, the only way it happens is, let's say Jesus doesn't come back for another 100 years. The only way it happens is if you begin praying right now for your kids to be in ministry. If you begin praying right now for your kids to meet a godly spouse down the road. Our legacy only is what it is because of the faithfulness and prayer warriors that our great grandparents and our parents were. And so I think a lot of times we miss that prayer changes things.
Yeah.
And so I just want to encourage you, be praying. And if you're in the midst of a ministry situation that is not ideal, that is a bit miserable, have you prayed about it? Because that is the first thing we need to do. It's easy to vent and it's easy to get frustrated. And it's okay to do that in the right ways. but you need to pray first.
Definitely, man. And it reminds me of something that God revealed to me at high school camp. I was speaking a few years ago, and it hit me. At the time, my son was 4, I believe. I want to say no, it was 3. And one of the students that I was also counseling, because I was a speaker, but I was also counseling because I just love doing both. And you feel so disconnected. You guys have both spoken for those kind of things, and you get there's almost like that's one of the things I really enjoyed about having you this week was that so many times the speaker comes in and they're just kind of like, okay, when they come in, I'm going to tell you, if they meet with you at all, it's like, we're going to come in, let me just tell you what the focus is, let's pray, and then me and my family are going to go shop or do whatever, or I'm so tired, I'm literally.
I'm gonna high five the kids down front, get them to follow me on Instagram, and then I'm out here.
I might sit down at a table with you for
Yeah.
like 5 minutes, that kind of thing. But like actually being there and being a part of that, I thought that was really cool. And not only this is a really cool part. You want to talk about a servant leader here?
Yeah.
I came off the lake. We had a lake day today, and by the time I got there, I was one of the last ones there because we were putting the boat up and stuff like that. And the first thing I see is TJ's like grilling. I'm like, how cool is that? Like, like our speaker is literally cooking.
He's cooking a meal for us
because he just wanted to. He's like, this is what I enjoy, and I love it. And that was just such an awesome thing. And your boys just jumped right into what we were doing. We were doing VBS, and they jumped right in and
so did TJ. He walked in and we're doing crafts with the 4th and 5th graders, and this girl's like, I can't tie this, and he just got down and he starts tying it, and I remember she couldn't get it to go through the bead, and he goes, let me see it, and he like licks it, and and I was like, dude, she was just picking her nose and like all kinds of things.
Well, it was so funny because I walked in and one of the girls is like, why are you doing that? He's like, just trust me, it works.
Yeah.
And they're just like, but why would you lick it? Or like, or even just like wetting your fingers.
No joke. He goes, I ain't licking nothing. I was like, you just got to do it,
Well, we grew up in the generation where we always made little cross beaded necklaces. We know how it works because trust us, we've done it.
That's right.
Years and years and years of VBS.
COVID wasn't a thing when I was little, man.
That's true.
Well, I just drinking out of an ice cooler that we found a dead lizard in, so I was not worried at all.
Come on.
Oh shoot! Sorry.
Low tech today. Low tech. But anyway, we so where was I going? I don't know.
That was a good story.
Yeah.
But
He's a servant.
He's very much so. I just think it's really cool that
and he was let me say this. He was a role model for me starting off in my ministry too. He may not know this. When I got to Central Baptist College, I attended his church for a little while, and we had some bumps and stuff in the road. I had some growing moments I had to go through, but I did. I looked up to my brother, just as my brother looked up to my dad, and I looked up to my dad as well. And that is one of the cool things about our family is when stuck on something or struggling with something spiritual, and we can reach out. And even though my dad's my dad, he can be a pastor and my dad at the same time. And a lot of people do not have that. I mean, that's huge. To not just get wisdom, but to get biblically founded wisdom
from your parents.
Yeah.
We talked about that earlier. The parents being the primary disciplers, but yet so many are scared to do it. And one thing that one dynamic I've seen a lot is where parents really just want to be their kid's best friend.
Yeah.
And that's a really tough line, and they know that they're authoritarians and stuff like that, but at the same time, they don't want to. And we have to do a better job in partnering with those, even if that happens to be your boss.
Not just parents though, youth pastors. I see this sometimes. They want to just be friends with their students, and you lose your authority. And there's nothing worse than not that you carry a lot of authority, but you have to carry some.
Right.
And I did that early in youth ministry. That's another talk for another day. But you know, I wanted to be buddy and stuff. And one day I had a pastor explain to me, like, listen, you can't lead if you're sitting over there with them cracking up at the same jokes and doing all this stuff. So
That's tough. It's really tough. But it was such a great pastor that would step in and tell you that, because it's easy, especially like, man, our youth pastor really does a great job like connecting and stuff like that. And a lot of times they'll just totally miss the fact that like that may not be the healthiest thing there you can connect without like that's why I love interns, like especially the younger ones, because I'm like, man, it's so cool to like watch you guys, because I mean I'm the youngest one at this table, but at the same time I have hit that point.
I'm the youngest one at this table.
Yeah, that's okay. Still been in ministry longer than you.
No, I've been over this. I grew up the PK, so I've been in youth ministry for 35
I've
years.
been in paid ministry longer than
You can say that.
But
My reward's in him.
the random conversations you have. Thank you so much for listening to this kind of off the cuff. I don't know how that sounded weird.
That was really weird.
All right.
Youth ministry.
So here's how we're gonna do this. Right at this point, Brent, I want you to edit, and we're gonna. I have no idea how long we've been.
Started
here.
now.
Let's see if it. Anyway, I'm just gonna go into our outro. Brent, you can cut. Thank you guys so much for listening. We would be honored if you would share our podcast with your youth pastor friends on social media, or tag a specific episode that really stood out to you on your favorite platform by using @TalkStudentMin. Finally, if you would like to be on our show in the future, please reach out to us on social media to send us an email to podcast@studentministryconversations.org. We'd love to set up a time for you to join us. Thank you guys both for being here. TJ, your first time, hopefully not your last. Obviously, Josh,
I mean, I live here.
You live here, so there's a good chance I'll have you on again, especially in a week.
No, I mean, like, I live here, so you guys need to go home.
Literally, yes. Thank you guys for listening, especially in this kind of different format where we have more than one guest, and this is really more of the conversation part of student ministry conversations. But we would love to hear from you guys what y'all think about this kind of format, if this is something you guys enjoy. And I always like to throw this plug out there. If something you guys heard resonated, please reach out to us. I know for sure both of these guys would love to have a conversation with you guys, especially if you're in a position where you're struggling on the PK side of that, or maybe like me, you're like trying to figure out how to navigate being the pastor, in that situation, how to better lead your kids. These guys have a lot of experience and a lot of stories that they can tell, and would love to sit down with you guys and have that conversation if you guys would like to. All of their contact information will be found in the show notes, so hit us up on that. You guys have a great week, and we'll catch you guys on the